Welcome to another episode of the Sports Sentiment. I am your host, Nicky Rias, and we are back once again talking college football. It is already week 5, and we got ourselves a big-time battle out here in the Bay between San Jose State and Stanford. It is the 69th edition of the Bill Walsh Legacy Game, and I know a lot of people between both fan bases are amped up for this one as San Jose State 1-2 heading into this one after a 31-21 win against the Idaho Vandals last week. Stanford, on the other hand, 1-3 and 1-1 in ACC play. And we're going to take a deep dive into the matchup here today. And we got the perfect guy to come on and talk about this very matchup, as he's a sports writer for Stanford on SI, Dylan Grausz. Dylan,
Yes.
Thanks for taking some time out of your day for me today. And I'm ready for this game,
Yeah,
man.
me too.
It was a great game last year, and I expect a bunch of great things here this weekend in Palo Alto.
Yeah, it should be a good one. Nick, thank you for having me on. Yeah, it should be a great matchup. I mean, obviously, if people are not familiar with it, it's the Bill Walsh Legacy Game because one of the most iconic Bay Area coaches of all time, a 3-time champion with the 49ers, also a Stanford coach. He played football at San Jose State. So there's a big connection in the Bay Area. If you're in the Bay and you have nothing to do on Saturday, go to Stanford Stadium and watch a game between San Jose State and Stanford. Why not? It should be a good time.
Yeah, 100%. I know it's a stacked college football Saturday with a bunch of heavyweights involved, but man, I know both teams that have losing records right now, but a lot of people think this is going to be a coin flip game. It was a thriller of a game last year. Stanford leads this all-time series 52-15-1. San Jose State actually hasn't won in Palo Alto since 2000, ironically enough. I know they kind of took a little bit of a break there, for several years, but this series is back on. We still got scheduled another 3 more games stretching across 2035, but I think it's a great opportunity. I think it's a good learning experience for both teams. And Dylan, I don't know where you were during that matchup last year on Black Friday, but 34-31, San Jose State won in SEFCU Stadium. It was honestly like just a great atmosphere just to be in for that game. And obviously the matchup delivered.
Yeah, it was a great game. Stanford, obviously, as we know, had some struggles last year in a lot of spots. But going into that San Jose State game, that was one game where a lot of people thought that Stanford would take it just because of the stigma of ACC versus a group of 5 school. But Nick Nash, the San Jose State legend, man, he was my pick for the Biletnikoff Trophy. I don't know why he didn't get it, but he gave Stanford a lot of trouble. Stanford had a really hard time defending that offense. But this year's game should be different, but both teams are new look teams. So I'm very excited to see the product that we get on Saturday. But yeah, overall, it's always a good matchup between the two schools. I think when it comes to a group of 5 school, San Jose State is always one of the better matchups that Stanford gets. So I'm really excited to see how it plays out on Saturday.
Yeah, and that game last year, I mean, a nail biter from start to finish. Ashton Daniels, Stanford quarterback. I talked about it last week when we were doing our Idaho preview. Like, these mobile quarterbacks, just with our personnel and the schemes, have kind of always been a problem. Even going years back down the line, and last year Ashton Daniels had 100 yards on the ground, had a touchdown. Alec Iomanner was pretty much the workhorse for this team at the wide receiver position last year. He's all of a sudden like a top target for the Tennessee Titans now.
Yep.
David Bailey, who was on this team last year, had a massive strip sack on Walker Egan that resulted in a defensive touchdown. We talked to the staff today. They did their presser, and our OC Craig Stutzman was like, we're so glad that David Bailey is not on Stanford anymore, just because of what he can do in regards to, just blowing up the line of scrimmage. You guys obviously got some new personnel all over the place, like a lot of teams do. Just overall, just what is your general, I guess, thoughts on Stanford here through the first 4 games? Because you guys have had a very tough, I would say, road just to get here. I mean, at Hawaii, at BYU, You host Boston College, good game for you guys. Then you guys are at Charlottesville, Virginia. I mean, you guys are flying all over the map. Obviously, that's got to do with the ACC realignment, but still, it's been all over the place for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, this team's been resilience has been a big part of it because starting with the spring practice firing of Troy Taylor and bringing in an interim right off the bat, 2025 has been all about a resilient team. But one thing that I've loved about this team, didn't do great against Virginia, but defense. The defense for Stanford's been incredible. You look at, Matt Rose at linebacker. You look at Teva Tafiti. You look at Clay Patterson. You look at all those guys that have really stepped up and helped the Stanford defense. The defense was the reason why they stayed in the BYU game as long. I know the score suggests otherwise, but they were really in the game until the very end. And then you look at the Hawaii game. Yeah, they lost 23-20, but defensively, they were on point. Now, the flip side of that is offensively, it's been a good 2 weeks of offense, I'd say, but overall, the offense has been a disappointment. You look at the quarterback play, Ben Gulbranson had 3 interceptions combined in the first 2 games, especially against Hawaii. He had a pretty critical pick late in the game that spoiled a drive. They were moving down the field. BYU, he couldn't get anything going. He had 2 interceptions in that game. Struggled mightily against a BYU team. There's a lot of different pieces. And then you look at the flip side of that. Boston College, he looked comfortable, had a touchdown against that. He helped Stanford score 30 points. The run game was incredible. Micah Ford has been an absolute dog back there. And then against the Cavs, 48-20 was a blowout, but offensively, Gulbranson looked comfortable. He made his throws. He didn't turn over the ball. So I'm very interested to see if the offense can continue being good. Now, one area that has been kind of, I wouldn't say disappointment, but a little bit banged up is the offensive line. You got Khalil House dealing with some injuries, Nicky Prongos dealing with some injuries, and it's affected the offense a little bit. But, I mean, look, that running game, kind of circling back to that's been the team's bread and butter on offense. Micah Ford, I believe he had, I got to look this up, but I believe he had 26 against Boston College, like 26 carries for like 150-something yards, something absolutely outrageous. But then I haven't even mentioned Cedric Irvin or Chris Davis or Tuna Alta here. They have a running back room. 4 guys can carry the ball and start. Like, it's any given Sunday situation. Yeah, Micah's the main guy, but they truly have an elite running back room that Wright can choose from. So, I mean, the run game is something that can go off at any time. But, I'm very interested to see, can Stanford put 3 consistent good phases together on a weekly basis? We saw against the Cavs. Offensively, they were good, but defensively, they just looked lost. Jay Green had a tough game. Colin Wright had a tough game. They were getting picked apart in the passing game. Terrell Harris had 3 first-half touchdowns. I mean, it was just a rough game. So, I mean, Stanford has pieces, I think, to find success. You look at what they have. They do have a young team with some guys that have experience. They have the pieces. They just have to put everything together. Reich's offense is vastly different than what Troy Taylor ran. Troy Taylor's offense was, I'm going to say it was kind of middle school-esque, high school-esque. It was not a fancy offense. Reich runs a pro-style offense. You got, the quarterback has to make his calls. The quarterback honestly has a lot more he needs to do. That's why Gulbranson won the job. He needs a guy who can run the offense, who can take command, who's an older guy. So, I mean, but overall, like Stanford has pieces. They just need everything to come together, all 3 phases, game in and game out.
Yeah. Just from the games that I've watched from Stanford, obviously the week 0 game, is isolated window. So I got a lot of eyes on that game, but, bits and pieces of your Virginia game last week, I kind of feel the same way for San Jose State in a sense, right? Because, we've had, some stretches where our defense, like versus Central Michigan, took a long time for them to adjust.
Yeah.
And then the offense has kind of been slow to arrive to the party when there was a lot of anticipation just with the personnel and the returning production that they've had. And it's been a little slow. The turnovers, I would say, not that they really haven't been in the red zone really, but it's just been a little slow. I think everyone was expecting for them just to hit the ground running in week 1, and it just really didn't happen. I would say defensively for us, like, I have to say, like, last week versus Idaho, like, that's the number 8th, FCS team in the
Yeah.
Idaho Vandals. So, I know everyone's probably thinking, oh, how come you didn't beat the Vandals with margin? The team just needed a win, like, first and foremost,
Yep.
like, if you just need to get a win under your belt. So I was to the point, like, if you just get a W, so be it. And I think it was very good, just for everybody, on the San Jose State side of things, like, hey, our kicker, Dennis Lynch, has struggled. He drills the game winner. And Walker Eget, who has been criticized a bunch at for the QB1 spot, in a sense, like, this he's been the guy since, like, National Signing Day, going back to last year. And, the production just hasn't been there. He's been careless with the football. For him to manufacture the drive, I thought was big for this team. So, some guys that have been slow starters have stepped up. To your point about Stanford, you could say the same for San Jose State. They just need a complete game.
Yep.
Dylan, for me, the big one in this, and, I feel like it's the same for Stanford, just because I feel like, and, I'm very curious to get your, I guess, perspective on this, is Stanford, I feel like, for their perspective, like, that offense in a sense, and Gulbranson as a quarterback is just really not built to come from behind. I feel like you guys really got to keep it within a possession, or you guys got to have the lead. I thought that was big for you guys versus Hawaii. Like, you guys got the defensive touchdown, and then you guys just go on these long 8-10 minute drives and pound the rock with, Ford and company. So is that the way you kind of see things? Like, hey, the team that gets off to a fast start here in the early going and dictates it, has the upper hand in this one?
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing that suggests to me that Gulbranson is built to necessarily lead a comeback. You look at all these top teams in college, Miami right now with Carson Beck. You look at, when Georgia had their national championship teams, when LSU had their team with Joe Burrow and all those guys. All those teams have one thing in common. They had an elite quarterback, but they also had quarterbacks in offenses that if you saw that they were down, you knew that they were going to come back and pull it out. So there's nothing that suggested to me that Stanford's offense has what it takes to come from behind, especially when they fall behind early. That Virginia game, the entire time I knew that it was over, especially knowing that they were falling behind as fast as they did early on. Virginia had the momentum, but offensively, Stanford hasn't really done anything spectacular in that sense. So a big thing for them is, yes, whoever wins this game needs to get out to a lead first, because both offenses, neither offense, I think, is necessarily equipped to come from behind. And when you look at San Jose, especially because they're adjusting to life post Nick Nash, that's a big thing, because Nick Nash has been a part of that program for years and years. I'm talking since 2019. Like, he's been there forever. And he was their quarterback, receiver. He was the offense there, right? He was the guy. Same with Stanford. Stanford had Ellick. Stanford's had, they have a whole new offensive guys that they need to figure out. They still haven't figured out an identity on offense yet, because they're down. I think they're missing John Anthony Hall, still hurt. He's projected to be a top guy. And then they've had some other injuries at receiver. They've just been hurt at some spots. They're still trying to figure it out. So yes, because neither team has really been able to figure out an identity yet on offense, whoever wins this game is going to have to get out ahead first, because I don't really have faith, honestly. I mean, more so for Stanford, but I don't have faith that that offense is going to be able to come from behind if they need to. So whoever wins this game is going to be the team that scores first and is up ahead first.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. Like, San Jose State has really preached Coach Kenny Amontalolo. He even said it, like, today in our presser, like, we have to start out fast. Like, we have to get off to, like, we can't put ourselves in, these 14-0 deficits, every single week. Cause we're just, it's more often than not, like, we're just not going to come up on the right side. These teams are too talented. Interestingly, like, a lot of, despite Stanford struggles and everybody just kind of being down on the program and everybody saying, hey, like, it's kind of a rebuild year. Like, Frank Reich has just kind of come in here and just trying to establish a culture in a sense for whoever, comes in here next. There's been a lot of high praise, like, hey, this is the toughest team that we're going to probably face, next to Texas, like just from an athlete standpoint.
Yeah.
So obviously, they're not overlooking, Stanford in a spot like this. Just I think that's important to note here. Right. But for San Jose State, this is quite honestly, I think this is a game where I think both teams are going to have success in what they want to do. San Jose State has actually, like, the last 2 weeks become more of a run team. And it's more so just because that's the way defenses are playing them, because the book was out on them last year, and they had this brand new scheme with the spread and shred, and everyone was kind of going nuts over it. And it was kind of like an adjustment on the fly, when they look at the tape, all their opponents every week, like, okay, how do we play this? And the way that Nick Nash and Justin Lockhart were going, and now all of a sudden everybody's playing 3 safeties back, and they're all of a sudden not really stacking the box, and all of a sudden 87-yard run for Jabari Bates last week, and they're pounding the rock all of a sudden, and you're having success running the ball. So they're adjusting on the fly here, but I'm just kind of interested in what version of San Jose State we get. We know they want to throw the ball first, but I think it's going to be all dependent on what Stanford throws at them. But Dylan, I think Micah Ford is going to still have a field day in this game. Like, Stanford has had success even against quality opponents running the ball. It's going to come down to who makes the plays in the red zone, right?
Yep. I also will say this. I think it's going to honestly come down to what happens up front, because you look at the run game on both sides. Like you said, the running game for San Jose State has been the bread and butter. The running game for Stanford has been the bread and butter. So it's really going to come down to how the offensive lines play and how they respond to the adjustments that are made. Because you look at Stanford, they didn't really necessarily do this great the first game, but at least the last couple of games, they've done a good job of adjusting kind of in the middle of the game to certain situations. Maybe it hasn't paid off. Against the Cavs, we saw that they adjusted, but they still struggled. But they do a good job of adjusting on the fly. So if the flow of the game really is the run, it's going to be how the lines respond to that flow and how everyone plays up front. Because Micah Ford is the type of guy who could have a field day, but it kind of depends on how the run blocking is. It's the same thing with San Jose State. Their running game is really strong, but it's also going to depend on if their line can stay healthy and if their line can respond.
Yeah, I'm very curious to get your take on, like, the wide receiver room, because I think everyone knows that the Cardinal are run first, and that's where, they kind of get a lot of their points from, and a lot of their success comes from that. Yep. But I feel like, when you get a guy like CJ Williams, and just with the Alec Iomanner departure to the NFL, everyone's kind of expecting some sort of production at the wide receiver position, just because it was a bright spot for the team last year. Obviously, different coach, different scheme, different quarterback, there's a whole bunch of different things here. But I would say probably your best wide receiver production of the year came from last week. I know you guys were playing from behind a bunch, but CJ Williams has over 100 yards and 9 catches, and Bryce Farrell has 4 catches for 135 yards and a TD. Do you expect some sort of, wide receiver usage? Maybe you might not get those type of numbers, but do you expect some sort of, hey, CJ Williams has himself a 30-yard catch and run here at some point in this game?
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think a lot of it early in the year was Stanford really trying to figure out the personnel that they had, because they only returned 1 catch from their 2024 team. They lost Ellick, they lost Ismail Cisse, they lost Emmett Mosley, they lost Tiger Bachmeier, they lost all of their starting receivers, and it was just it was an exodus, right? CJ is proving that he's a number 1 type guy, and that's not even mentioning the fact that John Anthony Hall has not even played a game yet. So I think now we're starting to really see who Stanford's going to rely on to be the pass catcher. CJ is number 1 right now. He's proven he's going to be a good player. So I would definitely expect him to have more games like that now that they know that he can do it. And Bryce Farrell's an interesting guy. He's been on the program, I want to say, since 2020 or whatever, but he hasn't really played just because of how crowded it's been. but he's fast. Like if you saw, like he's fast, he's athletic, he's quick, and he proves that he can get open. So, knowing that and him being a veteran on a team that has a lot of young talent, I would expect him to also continue to be good. Now, would I expect him to have the game he had against the Cavs? No, because that's very hard to do. But I would expect Bryce Farrell to be the type of player that gets a lot of work the rest of the season, considering the fact that Stanford's had a lot of injuries all year long. And now that they're starting to figure out the guys who can play, I think now it's more of okay, you can play. Now we're going to find ways to get you more integrated in the offense.
Yeah, I think all eyes are going to be on, just the line of scrimmage play just because of, Ford and company. But CJ Williams and Jaylen Thomas should be a fun battle to watch on the outside. Jaylen Thomas was redshirt freshman. He's a corner, was committed to San Jose State as a safety. He's from Los Gatos, so not too far from the area, but was a guy that blossomed in fall camp, was never really on anybody's radar. And all of a sudden he's listed as the first cornerback on the depth chart week 1. And it was one of these things for Thomas, like because of the Central Michigan, personnel, just their obscure 3 quarterback system and, them pounding the rock 50 times in week 1. And then I say this because like in the Texas game, like it's one of those games, like it's really hard to grasp just because of the talent disparity in a sense, but just because the game was a blowout, it was one of those games where, for San Jose State and Texas, it's like you could go like on some of the tape and stuff, but like it's almost like I don't really take too much from it in a sense. No. But this is I think a really fun battle because Jaylen Thomas, like they threw to his side last week, and that's why I was very intrigued to see him. They threw to his side a bunch in the game versus Idaho, and he had 2 pass breakups. This guy's, making a play on the ball. So if they do go CJ Williams' direction, that's a fun one to circle for number 29 for San Jose State. Just to go one-on-one there with Williams. So I'm excited to see that one. Dylan, I'm curious to get your take here because everybody sees the max exodus, just within the program and stuff. But Frank Reich, as your interim head coach for 2025, just what has he really done just to kind of like rebuild things? I don't know how much, you got your hands on there at like the practices and stuff, but just what has been the vibe? What has it just been like with Frank Reich and just trying to get Stanford football back in the right direction?
Yeah, one thing he's really, really instilled and one thing he's really gotten, he's got guys to buy in. Like from what I've heard, they love Reich. They would run through a wall for him. He's almost brought like a refreshing energy to the program. Everyone knows that it's probably only going to be a 1-season thing. Luck made it very clear in the intro press conference that there really is not a scenario where he comes back. So he's just basically come in and he's basically brought the team together, right? The team knows the situation that they're in. He's got guys to just buy in. Maybe he hasn't really rebuilt anything yet, I'd say necessarily, because the program is kind of in a weird spot, but he's just really gotten guys to buy in. You can really tell that the team cares. I mean, this team, there's a lot at stake, right? You have a program that people are kind of writing off. They're in limbo. They don't really know where they're going next in terms of a long-term coach. So he's just really gotten guys to stick together and buy in. And, you can tell that what he's gotten from the NFL as a coach and he's brought into college, he knows how to develop talent, right? He's a former quarterback. He worked with Andrew in Indianapolis. He won a Super Bowl with the Philly and got Wentz to play like an MVP. He knows how to develop talent. So he's brought a new energy. He's got people to buy into what he's selling. And he's really gotten the most, honestly, out of what he has. You've seen guys like Micah Ford. Stanford has not had a 1,000-yard running back, I want to say, since 2017 or something like that. Ridiculous amount of time. Micah Ford is going to get 1,000 yards this season easy. If he keeps playing the way he is, he will get it easy. In fact, he may break the 1,200-yard mark. So he's definitely brought a new brand of football to Palo Alto. And even if Stanford struggles, I think you're going to see a major improvement just for the for the future, because you're going to see guys next year come in much better than they were because of the way that they're being developed under Frank, and that's huge. That is a big thing of what they're doing this year.
Yeah, and I have to say, like, I know, like, we're kind of in this era of college football now. We're like, okay, like, a lot of these power fours are, you know, kind of going a direction like, hey, we just kind of need a general manager to run things here. But I have to say, just from an outsider looking in, like, I think that's really good that Andrew Luck is kind of, you know, kind of all in and, you know, very hands-on and involved. Like, he's everywhere. He's in the coach's box. He's in the sidelines. Like, you know, I don't know if, like, he's calling plays or stuff, but, like, all of a sudden you see him with, like, a play sheet and stuff. Like, he's almost like
he's reportedly in the meetings
sense,
with quarterbacks. Right? Yeah, he's actually, I was going to say, he's actually been in meetings he meets with the quarterbacks, I believe, once a week, or at least he meets with Ben like once a week. So he's not a coach, but he's kind of a coach. He's helping out a lot. He's basically providing his NFL expertise and his quarterbacking knowledge to practices and to the games, and he's helping them out a lot. So this team is just, it's all about developing and taking a step forward. Luck said that in the presser. The big theme of this year is just improving. Doesn't matter if they go 2-10 or 10-2. They just want to make sure that for the future, whichever coach they bring in, if it's not Frank, they want to make sure they have the pieces to compete down. They want to be a competitive program within a year or two. That's the goal.
From a defensive perspective, from you guys, you know, this season, you know, you mentioned some guys. I know some guys have been banged up for y'all, but Colin Wright at cornerback, Clay Patterson on the defensive line. Those are just, you know, two names that kind of jump off the page here. Which names do we need to circle here for the matchup here on Saturday that could have a massive impact here?
Yeah. So Colin is a big one. He's probably going to be an NFL prospect. I'm not sure how highly touted he's going to be, but he's going to be a prospect. But a player who's been playing great and a player who, quite frankly, I think is going to be a fantastic stud is Matt Rose, the linebacker. Stanford lost both of their starters at linebacker after 2024, and that was a major question going into 2025, who would replace him. Matt Rose has been incredible. He flies to the ball. I believe he's finished with double-digit tackles, I believe, in 2 out of the 3 games, if not all 3. So he's been great. And he's the type of guy who, he will fly from end to end, and he's a great name. Clay Patterson's been great. But another player who's been great is Teva Tafiti, the edge rusher. Look, David Bailey led the team in sacks for the last 2 campaigns. He's gone, right? So Stanford needed to find a guy to replace him. And Tafiti's been that guy. He's been a great player. He's been hurt. I believe he was out against the Cavs. And we clearly saw with him out, Stanford's D-line is not as good. Chandler Morris had a field day. The offense was humming. So without Tafiti getting to the quarterback, you can clearly tell that there's a difference. So those are the 2 main guys I'd say to watch for on Saturday.
Yeah, and we should mention as well, just from a San Jose State defensive perspective, I asked the coaches this today, just because they're very familiar with Ben Gulbranson. They played him last year at Oregon State. Was an Oregon State Beaver last year. Now he transfers down to Palo Alto. The defense won them the game last year in Corvallis. So, just a little side note there. Like, this is not their first rodeo with Gulbranson. He's been in college forever, so a lot of teams have seen him before. But just important, just for the listeners and watchers out there, like, hey, Derek Odom is familiar with Gulbranson and his tendencies and such. Yep. So, I think that's important to note. But hey, Dylan, I don't know if this is kind of considered like a must win for you guys in a sense, but I just feel like from the San Jose State perspective, like just from what you hear, like on the noise, like on social media and such, like from the fan base and just with the preseason expectations, this is kind of almost like a momentum, not save your season type win, but it's just kind of like one of those games. Like if San Jose State comes on top, it's just really good momentum before they start Mountain West play. I know you guys already started an ACC play, but beyond just the rivalry aspect, I mean, what values can you take from the, I guess, a game like this going forward here?
So I'm going to be blunt. This is a must-win game. If Stanford does not win this game, the season's pretty much done. And the reason why I say that is because after they play San Jose State, their schedule is a gauntlet because they play SMU, who is 2-2, but they were a playoff team last year, and they return the same quarterback that they had. So they're a good team. And then I don't even need to say anything about Florida State and Miami because both those teams are undefeated. And honestly, Miami is a heavy favorite for the CFP. So that's not it. So that's tough. Then you got Notre Dame. You got Pittsburgh, who isn't great, but they have Eli Horstein, who's a good player. North Carolina, not so sure about them, but they have the potential. And then Cal. So it's going to be a tough schedule. So Stanford does not win against San Jose State, especially where they are in a rebuild. I would anticipate the rest of the season to be very tough because they're going to play teams that are ready to compete. So if they don't beat San Jose State, it's going to be an uphill battle to try to get another win. And, they need some more confidence, especially because the Virginia game went worse than they thought. Stanford needs confidence, and they don't have any right now or any momentum, really. So they need to win this game if they want to have any hope of finding any success the rest of the way.
For sure. Yeah, but, it's very interesting perspective now since you guys moved to the ACC because you guys got all this cross-country travel, like, all those East Coast teams, like you saw it with Boston College, like they just looked flat, like, 2 weeks ago, right? I don't know if like the travel has anything to do with that. Obviously, Stanford better team. They forced turnovers. They got the big Micah Ford run, but I get it's just an interesting dynamic now, just because of all the travel that those teams have to do and the back and forth. Like, when you're hosting like the East Coast team in Palo Alto. You guys got to. I swear, because these are college kids. There is an edge to that from that standpoint, right?
There absolutely is, especially when you're going into a new environment that you've never been to, right? Because a lot of these ACC teams have never played each other because of the fact all the realignment stuff. So the travel's a big part of it. The new environment stuff's a big part of it. Having to get into that routine's a big part of it. So college football now is in a weird state. You're seeing some of those teams that have been dominant still are, but then you're also seeing some teams kind of struggle to adjust to their new conferences just because they're playing teams they've never played. The travel it's a lot. So I do think that has something to do with it. Now, that being said, though, it still is a football game, right? At the end of the day, it still is a football game. You're still playing the game. You're still playing against players that I'm sure, some of these kids have played against each other in high school or grade school growing up. So there's just that aspect of it. Still a game. So, I mean, either way, we'll see what happens. I mean, it's kind of tough, but we'll see.
There you have it.
Yes, sir.
I mean, look, should be a good game all around. Yep. I'm very excited. I'll be there in attendance. I'm going to be broadcasting on the call. So I'm going to, just be Kirk Herbstreit. I'm not going to give you a pick here, but regardless, it's one of those games. Like, it's a big one for both sides, just to get some momentum, for the meat of the season here. So, look, should be a fun game and most certainly looking forward to it. Dylan, where can people find your work? I know you're doing a bunch of stuff out there in Palo Alto for Stanford on SI. What's going on here throughout the rest of the season for you on your end?
Yeah, so I will be covering the Stanford football team as well as the bass. I cover all Stanford sports all year long. You can find my work on Stanford Cardinal on SI or StanfordOnSI.com. There we post from football stuff to alumni and the pros, all that stuff. I also have a Twitter following. If you guys want to follow my Twitter/X account at Dylan_Grausz. I also have a podcast that we cover just Stanford called Cardinal Chronicles. It's a great show where we talk all things Stanford sports. Right now we're doing the football stuff because it's in season. So a lot of exciting stuff happening around the farm.
100%. Hey,
yes, sir.
And San Jose State and Stanford getting together on the hardwood this year, bringing it back. So that should be a fun one. That should be a good one. It's out here in the South Bay. And Sounds good, man. We're gonna we'll definitely connect for that one. We'll get you back on the pod for that, and best of luck this weekend. We'll be definitely catching up down the road.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. All right.
Yes, sir.
That will do it for this episode of the Sports Sentiment. Once again, I am your host, Nick Urias, and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.